Vegan 101, how to leave animals the fuck alone.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Do What You Can for the People, the show that nobody asked for. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Nicole, and I'm joined today by my good friend, Veronica Johnson. Veronica is the sustainability coordinator at Southwestern University, my favorite fiery redhead, and a dedicated vegan. I'm so happy to have Veronica on the show today to talk about all things vegan. Hi, V.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on the show today. I was really stoked to have you on the show because I think that there's a lot to unpack when we talk about vegan from a sustainability perspective. And I know that some of the things that we wanted to talk about were why there are health benefits, how it can protect the environment, and some of the ethical concerns behind veganism. So I think we should just dive right in because everyone knows what being a vegan is.
And maybe we start.
Well, why don't you clarify for us?
Yeah, that's actually a lot of questions I get on a daily basis is, hey, are eggs vegan? Is fish vegan? I'm like, no, it's not. It comes from an animal. So in a nutshell, being vegan is not consuming anything that has come from an animal, whether that's from food or your clothing or the entertainment you consume. No animals are exploited in the process of you getting all those things. So no fish, no eggs.
I think, yeah, I'm actually glad you clarified that because I love the fact that you highlighted it's not just what you eat, it's also what you wear and what you do. And I think those are really important considerations when you think about the disruption of wildlife and things like that, which we will definitely dig into. But let's start with the health benefits of eating vegan. So plants have essential nutrients that you can't really get from other foods. And we're not saying that you should think that, oh, we have to eat all plants all the time, but there are certain things in plants that you simply cannot get from other foods. And so plants should always be a part of your diet in some capacity. There are vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and antioxidants in plants that keep your cells healthy and your body in balance so that your immune system can function at its best. Plant-based diets also improve your arterial flexibility and diameter, which leads to better blood flow. And a plant-based diet, which is lower in saturated fat and free of cholesterol, helps improve your blood viscosity or thickness, which helps more oxygen reach your muscles, which can in fact help improve your athletic performance. I'll pause there if you have anything to add.
I guess a quick clarifier. There's a big difference between a vegan diet and a whole foods plant-based diet. So all these amazing benefits you just mentioned are from eating a whole foods plant-based diet, which essentially means not processed, straight from the source, delicious soybeans, and really getting the plant at its fullest. A vegan diet is just pretty much anything you consume doesn't have animals. So my delicious vegan chicken tenders and vegan mac and cheese I ate for lunch is not healthy in the slightest because just because it's made from soybeans, having it being processed down into that delicious form doesn't actually make it healthy for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Oreos are vegan, right? And
yes.
You could, I mean, in theory, you could just eat Oreos and only Oreos and be a vegan, but would that be living your best life? Probably not.
Or maybe so. That sounds like a great life to live.
Agree to disagree. I personally don't like Oreos. We can have an off-chat conversation about that.
Of course, of course.
I think another few things that we wanted to talk about were that animal-based products are higher in cholesterol and fat, and if consumed in high quantities, they actually increase your risk for heart disease, diabetes, and cancers. And something that you put in our notes and something that I did a little bit of research on is that actually eating more plant-based can not only lower your risk, but in some studies has been proven to reverse that. Is that something that you've come across?
Yeah, there's quite a few vegan documentaries out there around health. One in particular is What the Health. Another one is Forks Over Knives, both of which have studies of people who were just chronically unhealthy, type 2 diabetic, and they just went on a whole foods, plant-based diet for a month or so, and they saw that they didn't need insulin, or that their weight dropped and they were no longer in a high risk category for a heart attack. Again, that's the emphasis on the whole foods plant-based diet, and also incorporating that with exercise. People can see numerous benefits. One of my favorite doctors around plant-based nutrition is Dr. Michael Greger. He has his own website called nutritionfacts.org, and he goes into all the things you should eat. So let's focus on what you shouldn't, because of those benefits you mentioned earlier. Like, you need to have a certain amount of nuts. You need to have a certain amount of greens and cruciferous vegetables, however you say that, in order to have that maximum benefits of all the plants holistically on your body. Flax seeds are huge in nutrition. Herbs are high in antioxidants. So yeah, having a different array of plants can make you healthier.
Yeah, and I think also the emphasis here is on the whole foods part, so I was vegan briefly for like 6 months, mostly just because I wanted to see if I could do it. And the other portion was because I love to experiment with food. And I think one of the things that I really took away from it was I was so much more conscious of what I was putting into my body, because at the time there weren't a lot of like vegan options. There weren't a lot of things that you could find in the grocery store or in restaurants. And so I was cooking a lot of whole food meals. And I just remember thinking, wow, like I am putting good stuff into my body and I feel good about it. And I think even just that consciousness of what's going into your body is a positive health benefit.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, prior to me being vegan, I was pescatarian. And prior to being pescatarian, I was vegetarian. But when I became vegetarian, I had no idea what I was doing. I legit ate cheese pizza with a handful of spinach on it every single day for lunch because I had no idea what good vegetables were. I would say by being vegan, I've been more or less forced to experiment with foods, and discovering new foods that I actually thoroughly enjoy, like eggplants, for example. Never once had an eggplant in my life before the age of 20, and that's one of my favorite things to have now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and there's some really creative things out there. I went down the YouTube rabbit hole a couple years ago on like how you can make things into vegan food, and I found a recipe for turning carrots into vegan hot dogs.
Oh yeah, that's
Have you
delicious.
done that?
Yes.
It was fascinating to me. It's like you marinate them in like a bunch of spices,
Liquid smoke.
liquid
Yeah.
smoke, and then you throw them on the grill to get the grill marks. And I was like, this is so cool. This is food science. That's what this is.
I will say though, it doesn't taste like a carrot, but it definitely does not taste like you're eating a hot dog.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
But still fascinating. And I think that if you go into it with that expectation, if you look up this recipe, put that expectation into your mind that it's not going to be a carrot, it's not going to be a hot dog, but it will be delicious. And
a delicious smoky vegetable in a bun.
With your choice of toppings. Anyways, we digress. Let's get back to some of these health benefits. So this is not really a shock, but most people are lactose intolerant, which is another reason to maybe consider it, at the very least, removing dairy from your diet. Approximately 65% of the human population has a reduced ability to digest lactose, and lactose intolerance in adulthood is most prevalent in people of East Asian descent, with 70 to 100% of people affected in those communities. I will say I actually prefer vegan ice cream.
Me too, as a lactose intolerant person. No, I'm also lactose intolerant, which is something I just completely disregarded my entire life and just tortured myself, being like, I want this delicious milkshake. And then afterwards, I'm just like, why did I do that to myself? And now I can have a delicious milkshake and not suffer. And it's great. If you are lactose intolerant, do yourself a favor and enjoy the deliciousness that is vegan ice cream.
Vegan ice cream is great. I love all non-dairy milks. I also have recently gotten really into cashew yogurts. I don't know if you've gone
Delicious.
down that. Yeah, so good. They're so creamy and delicious. And I think that there's this misconception that vegan food isn't going to live up to the standard, like what is the normal yogurt and stuff like that. And that's really not true. And in a lot of cases, ipso facto, I think it's way better. And it's nice to know that I'm doing good for my body, doing good for the planet, and also like it's an upgrade in my fridge.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Um, Moving a little bit further away, so 98% of animal products come from factory farming, and you may be thinking, what the hell does that have to do with health? Well, apart from factory farming having a whole slew of environmental, social, and ethical issues, in factory farms, animals are pumped with antibiotics, which could lead to antibiotic resistance later on in humans. And I wasn't able to find any specific facts or figures on this because we just have so much information in here, but I'm really curious to see, you know, in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, how the kids today who are eating all of this stuff kind of grow up and what the impact is on their bodies and their health.
Yeah. I am not a doctor. um,
Disclaimer,
but
we're not doctors.
disclaimers, we're not doctors. Yeah. But there are so much antibiotics that are put into animals, whether that's directly through steroids, or to pump them up for food or in their feed. A lot of the factory farmed animals are just genetically unhealthy, and the amount of antibiotics put into them is sickening. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure somewhere there's a quote or a figure that shows that the most of the antibiotic use in the United States is actually going to farm animals. I don't know what the number is. Double check me on that. But it's crazy to know that some people, if they're sick with a bacterial infection and need an antibiotic, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. I'll do some extra digging after we get off this recording, and if I find anything, I'll put it in the description box below, along with links to everything that we talk about today. So yeah, a lot of health risks of not eating vegan, a lot of health benefits of switching to a more holistic plant-based diet. But beyond what you're doing for your body, there's a whole range of issues to consider about how it benefits the planet. And I think that's something that we're both really passionate about, being MBAs in sustainability. I did a little bit of digging and I found out that livestock farming contributes 18% of human-produced greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. That's more than all of the emissions from ships, planes, trucks, cars, and all other transportation put together. That's insane to me. I mean, it shouldn't be. I feel like we talk about this a lot, but I think just like thinking about it in that framework is crazy. And cattle ranching is the #1 culprit of deforestation in basically every Amazon country. In 2008, it accounted for 80% of deforestation. So we are putting a bunch of emissions into the air. We're cutting down all of our trees. And then to add, we're actually also destroying our waterways. So the feces from from factory farming pollutes our air and our waterways. When you think about a factory farm, especially, it's incredibly difficult to keep those giant facilities clean without using a massive amount of water. And the figure that I found was that to run the flushing systems that actually clean the floors, 150 gallons of water are required per cow every single day. It's an insane amount of water. Anything to add about livestock?
They're terrible for the planet. No, we love animals when they're not in condensed factory farms. Yeah, that's probably the biggest reason, or the #1 reason why I went vegan in the first place. As I mentioned before, I was pescatarian, and it was in November 2015 that I watched the documentary Cowspiracy, which goes over a lot of the figures you just mentioned, and it was shocking. I mean, I had already cut out meat from my diet, but I was still consuming seafood, still consuming dairy and eggs, despite my lactose intolerance. And it was not only eye-opening, but I just felt that I was being hypocritical as an environmentalist, being like, oh, turn off your lights, don't use cars. And take 2-minute showers. And yet the biggest thing you can do to reduce your water footprint, to reduce your carbon footprint from an individual standpoint, obviously, yes, we should continue pressuring fossil fuel companies to be less trash. But from an individual perspective, the biggest impact you can have to reduce your impact is what you
Found
eat.
a cheeseburger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swap it out for a Beyond Burger.
Oh yeah, delicious.
Those are so good.
Again, not healthy.
Not healthy, but they're a nice treat. I think another thing that we talked about a little bit in our notes was wildlife trade, and I know this is something that you're particularly passionate about, so I'm going to kind of let you take it away on this one.
Yeah, I'm really big into the wildlife, all of them. That's actually what kind of got me interested into the environment. So before being interested in caring about the environment, what got me to care about the environment in the first place was volunteering with wolves in Colorado. And wolves have been pretty much in the United States almost driven to extinction. And that was because of hunting, and also because they were a risk for cattle farmers. So cattle farmers in the West have all their cows and their ranches, and everything's good because they have the open air and they're not on a factory farm. But the second a wolf comes into their area, they are shot and killed. And wolves are incredible apex predators who, one, don't deserve to die because they are predators who want to eat delicious cow, I guess. And the second thing is we need apex predators. We need wolves because not having the predators within an ecosystem causes a whole mess of problems. That's the whole reason why we have an outrageous deer population, is because the only thing that's killing the deer now is human hunters.
And the occasional car.
Yeah, and cars. Because we have a ridiculous low amount of grizzly bears, coyotes, wolves, other things that eat deer. So it's hugely problematic. We need to have predators in place. But more specifically on the wildlife trade perspective, so I mentioned wolves were driven to extinction because of cattle farming, but also their fur. And a lot of wildlife are being traded because they have a commodity, whether it's fur or their tusk, their ivory. In some cultures, they harvest like bizarre parts of an animal, like fins of sharks and fins of manta rays, because they believe they have health benefits, which are not scientifically proven. It's just based off of their culture. But because of that, it's just leading to this massive trade of these exotic parts of these animals. And when there's fewer and fewer animals, the prices get higher, and then it just causes this this problem, which just keeps getting worse.
Right. Absolutely.
And
there's a higher demand because it's a, rare commodity. Go ahead.
I'm getting fired up. Another thing is this pandemic we're in right now stemmed from the wildlife trade. The reason we have been in our homes for 6 months is because we wouldn't leave bats the fuck alone. Like, if we just left them alone in their caves and didn't mess with them, there wouldn't be the zoonotic plague that is currently facing society. All major pandemic diseases have come from animals. We're talking mad cow, we're talking swine flu, we're talking bird flu, we're talking Ebola, we're talking COVID-19. If we just left animals the fuck alone, we wouldn't have pandemics.
So true. I mean, if nothing else, I hope that that's one takeaway that everyone gets from this: leave the animals alone. But just going back to what you were talking about this chain reaction.
Yes.
You good?
Yes,
this chain reaction. So when you remove an apex predator, or really any animal from your ecosystem because it goes extinct for whatever reason, you set off a chain reaction. Mm-hmm. And so actually the wildlife trade may put nearly 9,000 land-based species at risk of extinction, which is going to be a huge problem.
Yep.
it's already a big problem that I feel like not enough people are talking about, and it's going to be an even bigger problem. So lots of reasons to leave animals the fuck alone.
That's what you should name this episode.
Leave
Vegan 101, how to leave animals the fuck alone. Okay, we digress. Let's talk about ethics.
Let's talk about ethics. Yeah. So in the similar line of talking about animals, 200 million animals are killed for food around the world every day. And there's a certain amount of speciesism that's going on where your culture determines which animals we deem worthy for human consumption and which ones are more appropriate for domestication. And there's a lot of shaming culture that I think happens around our planet, and a lot of myths that are said in kind of to try and like beat down the idea of veganism. And it doesn't really matter. I think that as a species, we need to understand that every living being has worth and accept that. That's something that we take very seriously in Hinduism, and so it's something that I've grown up in. But I do see that a lot of people don't necessarily think the same way, and we can get into all of those myths in a little bit. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about for ethics was how the treatment of animals in factory farms is actually pretty horrific. So dairy cows are forcibly inseminated, then they have their calves taken away so that we can produce milk in this country. Male calves go to veal farms, female calves are raised to then become dairy cows. Correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. Male egg chickens are mass murdered in various ways that we won't get into, and meat chickens have been bred to be larger than natural, so that's actually to a point where sometimes they can't even stand up. Factory farms are a huge problem, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about it, Veronica.
Well, you just covered some of the highlights. Yeah, it's very depressing to know what these animals go through, because think of it this way. We go back to the concept of speciesism. How would you feel if your dog went through the same treatment of a cow or a pig in a factory farm, to be forcefully inseminated, forced to give birth, have their puppies taken away, only to be tied up to little machines to have the milk sucked? And no one wants to drink dog's milk anyways. And then only to, once you're done sucking the milk out of the animal, or the dog in this case, for the sake of raising awareness, that you just murder it. You just send it to slaughter and be like, delicious, McDonald's hamburger. Because that's essentially where dairy cows go, because they aren't being bred for meat. They are being bred for their milk. So their meat just kind of goes to your lower level hamburger patties.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate. And I think even if for whatever reason, and this is totally, I mean, there's no shaming or whatever, but if for whatever reason you're having a hard time with connecting with that compassion for animals, another portion of the ethical conversation is that the workers in these factory farms and the slaughterhouses are mostly immigrants, and they are really mistreated. I mean, they're forced to work long hours in terrible conditions, and we saw this even in COVID-19, where slaughterhouses and meat processing plants were a huge place for outbreaks of COVID, but because of the demand of the meat industry, they were considered an essential place of work. And so we really have to examine the whole system that we've created around this demand for animal products, I think.
Yeah, the workers are hugely impacted. There's several cases that have been released of workers being not allowed bathroom breaks, that they're being forced to work the slaughter lines wearing diapers because they have a certain quota they have to fill. And not only just the workers, but also the communities that live next to factory farms are impacted. We talked about how, these species are polluting waterways and our air. Most of these factory farms are being strategically placed and built around communities of color who have low income and do not have the political power to fight and speak up for themselves. So numerous cases of children being raised and growing up with asthma, leukemia, have other diseases that you get from inhaling shit on a daily basis. It's really tragic. And that's just another consideration most people don't think of. They're just like, oh, I don't really care about animals. It's just like, well, do you at least care about people?
About kids. Do you care about kids? Yeah. A lot to think about here, just in terms of, I feel like a big portion of this is just truly understanding what the system is, what the reality of the system is. And I feel like until more and more people start talking about it, and luckily with veganism, there are so many resources out there. I mean, Veronica's mentioned a bunch of documentaries, and we'll include more links and stuff in the description box so that you can read up truly on what is the system. Because I think that for a long time in this country, it's been out of sight, out of mind, that a lot of people are very disconnected from their food. They don't know where it's coming from and what the whole supply chain really looks like.
Yeah. I mean, you see people all the time on Facebook or other forms of social media having outrage over a hunter killing a lion or a dog being abused, yet they may not realize that they're paying for this abuse and they're paying for this death on generally a daily basis. So it goes back to that question, like what makes a cow different than a dog or from a lion? Some people will say it's because they were raised that way. Well, why?
Let's get into some of these myths that we've listed out. I'm going to say the myth and you give me your rebuttal. How's that sound?
Okay, that's cool.
So vegans don't get enough protein.
I eat protein every day, bitch. Oh, that's not what it says. There's a lot of protein in plants, and it's especially high in beans, lentils, and soy. Just the other day, I had a very delicious tofu and lentil dish, and I'm pretty sure it had more protein than most meat eaters probably consume.
Yeah. Last week, I had a pea protein burger for dinner, and it had 23 grams of protein.
Wow.
Which is probably more protein than I needed in a day, but it was also delicious. So highly recommend looking into that. The next one is vegans don't get B12.
Technically, that is true. But also, when people talk about B12, they're not realizing that they're also not directly getting B12 when they eat it from animals. Animals just kind of serve as the middleman to getting B12. The B12 is in like grass and dirt, and no one eats grass and dirt except for cows. So then when you eat the cows, you get their byproduct of the B12. However, for vegans who don't want to eat grass and dirt, or the animals that eat grass and dirt, supplements are a thing. I get plenty of B12 from fortified non-dairy milk and juices, and they even just have supplements that you can consume like a pill. I haven't had to do that because, like I said, I get a lot from just my non-dairy milk.
Yeah, let's talk about that non-dairy milk. So I've heard that almonds use a lot of water.
They do, but not even remotely close to how much water it is to produce the same amount of dairy milk. It's ridiculous how much water goes into, one, keeping the dairy cow hydrated, two, keeping the food, to grow the food that the dairy cow eats, and then also to wash the shit away, like you mentioned earlier.
150 gallons.
It's too damn much.
Yeah.
But if you are super concerned about almonds and their water usage, perfectly understandable. Drink oat milk, because oat milk, out of all the plant-based milks, has the lowest water footprint, and it's delicious.
It's so good. I put oat milk in my coffee every day. 10 out of 10 recommend. But humans are omnivores. I mean, look at my canine teeth.
A lot of studies actually show that our anatomy isn't like real omnivores at all. We have really long intestines meant to digest plants. When you look at real omnivores and carnivores, they have very short intestines because they want to get the meat through their body as soon as possible, because when it stays within the intestines, it causes colon cancer and other problems. Likewise, if we were true omnivores, we would be able to go outside, grab a squirrel, and just eat it like a goddamn chicken wing, and we can't do that. For meat, we have to cook it, and generally, people don't eat meat without seasoning, and guess what those seasonings are made out of? plants.
Yep, that's true. I do love me some good herbs. You okay? You getting too riled up?
Sometimes I do.
Let's just skip to the last one.
Okay.
My ancestors and cavemen ate meat, and they were fine.
The life expectancy was significantly lower back then.
Yeah.
Oh, you added a new fun fact.
Yeah, so there were some preliminary studies that are still happening because, obviously there's not enough research of like seeing how long people live, but they have indicated that men and women who eat more plant-based could extend their lifespan by 9 and 6 years respectively. So that's 9 years for men and women, 6 years for women. And that I think is significant.
So Zac Efron's new like documentary series on Netflix, highly recommend it because he's beautiful. That's beside the point. It has nothing to do with veganism. But in there, he visits what are called centennial villages.
In Italy.
Yes, where most of the old people gather because, they just live to be 100 plus. And if you look at their diets, they're generally very focused on not processed, whole foods, and plant-based.
Yeah, so I mean, move to Italy, eat plant-based, live forever. Live forever.
Oh, do you really want to live forever these days?
That's, again, off camera conversation that we need to have. All right, so seeing as you are my favorite vegan, let's talk a little bit.
Am I also your only vegan?
No, I have other vegan friends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about eating a more plant-based diet, because I totally agree with you when you say that being vegan has never been easier. Tell me a little bit about how the industry has changed even in the time that you've been a vegan.
Oh my God, it is great to be a vegan nowadays. When I started back up in 2015, I remember eating like a vegan pizza with this god awful cardboard like vegan cheese. I was just like, how does anyone do this? I'm never going to get over my craving for real cheese. And now I have like 10 different types of vegan cheese in my fridge right now, and all of which are absolutely delicious. This has stemmed from the demand as more people spread, I guess, the benefits of the whole foods plant-based diet, or people are being aware of the environmental and ethical problems that come from the industry. The amount of people switching to being vegan has dramatically increased in the past 5 years, which has led to companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat making very delicious, very realistic meat-based alternatives. Goodbye tofurkey.
And those have actually also hit like fast food chains now.
Yeah.
So you've got the Impossible Burger at Burger King, I think. And Beyond Meat, I think, is at like Taco Bell, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe that's also Impossible.
Beyond Meat is at Carl's Jr. It's at Freebirds. I think there's another, like Del Taco. I don't know.
Yeah.
Taco Bell doesn't have any yet.
Okay, well, that sounds right. I knew there was a taco place somewhere in there. But yeah, you've got like these non-meat meats, this is what I'm going to call them, hitting like
non-cheese cheeses.
Hitting fast food chains, which I think is incredible, because I think that just really goes to show that there is a demand for it.
Yeah. I would say the biggest downside to that is, one, it's still technically fast food, and it's creating this culture of fast eating garbage. Because despite it being delicious and good for you, people shouldn't be eating a Beyond Burger every single day. Maybe like once every other week, like I do. Not saying that I'm the perfect vegan. Like I said, I stuffed my face with vegan chicken nuggets today. Lost my train of thought.
Privilege. Yes.
I haven't even gotten to privilege yet. The biggest problem with fast food and vegan foods being there is the price for them. So if you look at Carl's Jr., for example, a Beyond Burger there costs $6, which to the average consumer, oh, great, that's way cheaper than my Thai food that I have ordered for 10, 15 bucks. But for a consumer who actually has to rely on fast food and really cheap prices, they can't afford that. they're going to opt for the $1 regular burger at McDonald's.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's so the theme of season 2 of my show is privilege. And so maybe we talk about that a little bit. There is a privilege of access here in terms of eating vegan, doing it in a way that is actually good for you and not just stuffing your face with vegan chicken nuggets and Oreos. It is expensive to eat this way. And I think a lot of communities of color do live in food deserts. And if you're not really sure what a food desert is, actually go back and watch the episode before this where I talked to Leanne about food access and food deserts. And it's hard for people to have access to organic foods and sometimes even grocery stores. And so not only are things more expensive, but they're also less accessible. And it's unfortunate that sustainability is always such a privilege.
Now, veganism does not have to be expensive. If you're shopping at your Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, natural grocers, and other fancy health store, you're going to be paying the organic premium, the sustainability premium. But you can also find really cheap plants. You can buy lentils in bulk. You can buy soybeans in bulk. You could buy tofu for $1, and that could go a long way. So it doesn't have to be expensive, but oftentimes when people think of vegan food, they think of, oh shit, that's the really expensive vegan cheese from Whole Foods that costs $10. Yeah, I have that in my fridge. It's very fucking expensive. And I understand that most people probably can't afford $10 vegan cheese. But
it can be accessible. Most Indian food is vegan. And I think most people who live in India don't have that kind of money or privilege, but they do, not a lot of meat, not any meat in some cases, no cheese, not a whole lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that it is important to think about what works not just for the planet and your person, but also what works for your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And getting a little bit nitpicky about food deserts and accessibility to organic foods, everyone thinks that the quick fix to solving all problems is, oh, let's just give them a Whole Foods, let's give them a Trader Joe's. But a lot of research shows that when you add a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or even vegan restaurants that are high end into a low income area, it actually leads to gentrification, housing costs go up, all the white people move in who want to eat their fancy vegan shit, and then the communities who have lived there their entire lives are being pushed out, which is fucked up.
Very fucked up. I think there's a lot of fucked up things about our food systems, about our socioeconomic systems, about just the world that we live in, and it's all interconnected. So thinking about what we put in our body makes us think about a lot of these other things, and everyone should be thinking about these things. So thank you, Veronica, for coming on to the show today and talking about all of these interesting things. Like I said, I'll be including details and links below for people to find you on the web and do their own research and check out any of the things that we mentioned. And I just wanted to leave it with you if you had any closing words.
Yeah, I would recommend anyone who is wanting to try being vegan to do research first. Don't dive in and just eat vegan cheese pizza with a handful of spinach, because that will not, you won't see the health benefits, and eventually it'll get old. I also recommend looking at documentaries. There's a whole bunch of them online. Like I mentioned, I became vegan after watching Cowspiracy, and I kind of stayed vegan after watching Earthlings, which is an even more traumatic documentary that I don't recommend that you watch without a tissues or someone to hold you.
I was gonna say watch with a buddy.
Watch with a buddy, because that actually shows you the abuse hands-on. Not hands-on, but visually. Like you can't ignore the abuse any longer after seeing that documentary. And it's narrated by Joaquin Phoenix.
Love him.
Love him. He's the best. He's also vegan, obviously.
All right. Thanks, Veronica. And everyone else, we'll see you next week on Do What You Can for the People. Bye.